So this is us. And basically, we are governance design at MakerDAO. So my name is Elisa, and Retro next to me. And let's start with journey to MakerDAO. So basically, we have different experience, from consulting in corporate, startups, and Web3. So in different companies, big ones and smaller ones, and then now we are here in DAOcraft, which is part of MakerDAO. So, what is expected in a workshop? So, let's engage, let's learn, and let's have fun, first of all. So, this workshop is basically for different levels, so you don't need to be an expert in this field to participate and to be here. So, and ask questions. So, that's one of the first things. So, first of all, we are going to separate in different teams. And for this workshop, we're going to start with choose your character. So from I don't know anything, or I'm basically an expert in MakerDAO. I'm sorry, not in MakerDAO, in a DAO itself. Could be MakerDAO as well.
So what we'd like to do is try to break up into groups of 4 and try to match with people of your same skill set. So you're all on the same playing field. You're all able to, ask questions to one another. It's better if you do have a table. So I'm not sure if we could separate these, clusters right now into 2 tables, maybe 2 people on each side. But everybody has to get up and start pairing up, try to get into groups of 4s, and then we'll be able to move on with the rest of the workshop.
Y sí, vamos a explicarlo también en castellano para todos los que... Uy, perdón. Básicamente para todos los que, no estén tan duchos en inglés. Básicamente lo que vamos a hacer es nos vamos a separar en grupos de aproximadamente 4 personas. Puede ser hasta 6 people. Entonces, básicamente acá, identify your governance mastery. Entonces, si ustedes piensan que esto los representa, se van a juntar con grupos de gente que más o menos representan lo mismo, Digen o Regen. Entonces, más que nada es para esto, lo que va a hacer es... Entonces, lo que vamos a hacer es, quizás estas 3 mesas, vamos a empezar con el primer grupo, con Nob, después Digen, medio, y lo que es Regen, las 3 mesas de la izquierda. Así que empiezan a redistribuirse. Tenemos aproximadamente 5 minutos para esto. Okay, so, are we okay to start? Sí, básicamente, si no entendieron, hay que elegir una columna. Básicamente quiero elegir una columna. Principiantes, o los que no saben, no tienen mucha idea. Digen, en medio. Y después los que saben mucho, de aquel lado. Eso. Aunque sea que tengan un grupo de afinidad, no importa. Si están todos en una misma mesa, que más o menos todos sepan lo mismo, está bien. Es aceptable. So, are we good to go? Are you all in a group? Guys? Lo importante es formar grupos. So, the most important part is to create groups. Okay, so we are good to go.
All right. If there's any questions, since I'll be presenting in English, please raise your hand. I'm sure Ellie would love to help translate. But just to make sure that we walk away with some skills after this workshop, we're going to do a quick introduction to governance, operations, and design, and then move into some of the exercises. To kick it off, what is governance design? Governance is a fancy word for management. It's something Web3 came up with for creating a decentralized organization, having a token run things. But at the end of the day, just like you may have seen from our consulting experience, it's just creating repeatable processes with systems and structures supporting it. So the main takeaways or the main purpose of governance, operation, and design from our perspective is creating a system where you can make collective decisions, you can allocate resources effectively, both labor as well as capital, and then manage conflicts that pop up when you start to go outside of the lines of what has been defined already for the system. So an example of what this looks like in practice, think about designing a sandbox. We have two very similar structures. They're both squares, they both hold sand, kids play in them, but one has a crazy ramp, this other one has some walls to separate some things, and unless you really have a specific purpose in mind, these are both functionally the same and fantastic. But when you start to look at how DAOs differentiate themselves, we've had some great talks today, and I think Decentraland is a perfect example. They're running their system both similar to how Maker is, but also very different. And the experimentation to make sure that the system is aligned for what the protocol needs or the organizational outcomes are very important. So today, what we're hoping to do is to give you guys the tools to go out and actually produce and impact decentralized governances by writing proposals, understanding them, and just help improve the literacy of what these structures and documents are trying to do. In practice then, what we like to come up with is a little bit of this adapted Venn diagram where we focus on the people, the situations that the organization or the protocol is currently trying to navigate, and then take a look at the incentives of both trying to break the system, what are adversaries having in terms of motivation to disrupt or corrupt or attack, as well as what are the incentives for the community, the workforce, and the users to properly leverage the protocol and create this recursive system of improvement. What this really talks about is change management. And this is the thing that we're really trying to instill at Maker right now, which is to make sure that we're learning every day that information is no longer siloed within teams and that our documents and proposals are constantly improving from operational data and not just theories and research. So, I think that's enough preparation for starting to get hands-on. If there's any questions, please raise your hand and we'll pause here before diving in. But what's next is starting to identify the tools that we'll be using for the workshop, which are primitives that go into creating mechanisms, and then we'll practice using those on some hypothetical situations and then end today really trying to get the group here to produce proposals that Seed Latam can then take for funding and managing the commons. So any questions before we move on? No? Good. Cool. All right, let's go. All right, so first up is what is a primitive? You may have heard this before if you've taken some comp sci courses or if you've done any development. But at the highest level, a primitive is just a fundamental element. So if you think about it in terms of computer programming, it's a variable, it's an int, it's a string, it's a Boolean. It's something that is just fundamentally objective, very simple, it's the smallest part. When we start to say what's a primitive for governance design, it gets a little bit fuzzier, but we view it as solving one specific problem in a generic or unbiased way. So if you take a look at some of the examples I provided, things like cadence or time is very important. If you think about a governance cycle, it doesn't care about holidays, it doesn't care about weekends, it just keeps rolling week after week. And I think Tabal's looking at me because we skip December every once in a while, but that we fixed that. Consensus is another thing. Voting, what is the variable for achieving consensus? What is the way of looking at reporting or actually creating transparency, as well as infrastructure? What's the systems that these tools run on? So one example of the cards that we'll be handing out to help facilitate the workshop is demonstrating a consensus primitive, which is single choice voting. So do you want option A, option B, option C? You get one single choice. That's a primitive. Now, if we start to bundle primitives, we see mechanisms appear. Mechanisms are like functions. So that's taking several variables, putting them in a for loop, making it a repeatable call, or it's generating an output from an input, and it may depend on the state of the system. So when you look at it from a governance perspective, it's basically the same thing. It's a repeatable process, and more times than not, we use the word framework for that. I think the most famous framework at Maker has been the core unit framework, which is allowing funding, team leadership to emerge, as well as attaching it to a certain segment of work. If you can go to the next slide. What I've tried to demonstrate here is just, again, an example of a mechanism that takes delegation and single choice voting, it pairs it with a decentralized ID or a forum account, and then it ties it with compensation. And these are just 4 simple concepts that allow you to create a narrative or allow you to start building out a more robust and repeatable process for making governance happen when, again, there's just tokens that have voting power. How do we get from A to wherever Maker's at today? As an example, it's building with these building blocks.
Okay. So first question, who here doesn't speak English? Or doesn't speak Spanish? Because I can switch into Spanish as well, if it's needed. Or somebody, okay, so I will continue in English. And so let's start check your understanding of what we saw until now. So grants, example. So anybody here is not really aware of what a grants program is? I took it that's a no, we all know. So, for example, we have here a situation in which we have a lot of money, and basically we are running a grants program, and we want to separate each of the grants program into strategy, consensus, coordination, and incentives. So if we go to strategy, what do you think is the first part that you need to address?
We've kind of given you the answer on this one already. In terms of just taking a step back real quick, these decks are experimental. We tried to associate the suit to each one of these categories, but they're really just a brainstorming tool. So you're not limited to what's necessarily on the cards. Some of the categories may be fuzzy and it could be a consensus mechanism. So again, keep an open mind, and we'd love feedback. So if you have good feedback and you want a deck, make sure to talk to us afterwards, and we'll trade information for goods. But like Ellie was saying, for the strategy then, we're saying that funds that are idle are wasted. This is the approach and perspective we want to look at writing a proposal for a grants program. So what's next? From there, what's a consensus mechanism then that the DAO can say, is this a good use of idle funds or is it not? How do you even start to look at idle funds? So just somebody shout out some way that consensus can be reached. Maybe not. Did I break something?
Wait. O sea, ahora vamos a empezar con la parte práctica. Primero teoría y después pasamos a la parte práctica.
Yeah, so nothing with the cards right now. Just shout out some process or some system that can be used to come up with consensus within a group. Voting, perfect. So again, for consensus then, we're not going to look at a committee, we're not going to crowdsource it, we're not going to take data from Twitter, which could all be consensus mechanisms, and we're going to say a vote. So then what would be an example of a coordination primitive that we can use for our grants program? I would say an application, right? An application is a way that has a starting point, an end point, it exchanges information, and then there's probably some other things that need to be in there as well. As who's evaluating the application? How should the evaluation happen? Is it in seasons or not? Is it just a rolling window? These are some of the things that you'll be talking within your group to build mechanisms again. So the last one then is the incentive. So what's an incentive for the grants program to function? What's the motivation for people to participate? Money, there we go. But how is the money being handed out? Is it milestone based? Is it lump sum up front so then the team can disappear and never deliver? Is it no money for the first 5 years and it has to demonstrate value? Again, what are we trying to achieve? It all goes back to the strategy, and it's just, let's have funds be mobile. Let's use the resources that we have. So here are some more examples of the 4 categories of a proposal, if you will. And again, the way that the concepts we've been talking about relate, you have primitives, which you now have a deck of cards in front of you. They have some ideas of what primitives are. They then get bundled into mechanisms. But if we have just a ton of money mechanism or money focused primitives in use, then how does that relate to a strategy? How does that actually create coordination? When you sit down and write a proposal, the way that we look at it at Maker is that the strategy, which is really focused on the mission and the vision and what the organization cares about, is then agreed upon by some source of decision making, whether it's appointed facilitators or it's a token holder vote, or if it's a community forum poll, which we really don't do anymore. But again, these are just tools that we have used in the past. Once there's consensus on what we're doing, how do we do it? Is it a black box? That's been a problem that Maker's had for years. And the whole point of Endgame is to really open up the black box and make operations a lot more available for improvement as well as transparency. And then last but not least is, why are we doing all this? Why should people care? Well, most of the time it's money, but at the same time, if you can build reputation around creating quality products, or if you can, again, align actors so that there's more intrinsic motivations, we'll save that for the next workshop, I guess. But just to, again, demonstrate how these things are tied together, we're not going to play a game with the cards. So again, just to reinforce, these are just brainstorming tools. If you would like to look up the definition, there's a QR code on the back of the box as well as a URL. And again, if you want to come up with your own definitions within your group, totally fine. Don't be limited to what's just printed on there. Yeah, again, feedback's welcome. So if we were to use the cards to do the exercise we were just talking about, one strategy of making sure that there's fair funding and fair opportunity for everybody is using quadratic funding with ranked choice voting, pairing it with time-bound funding, so you're only getting money for a certain period of time. And then incentives are usually the heavy ones where you need to have some sort of consistent stream, vesting if you deliver. Again, just an example of what the output could look like for the previous question that we just asked. So let's play a game.
Yeah, so let's start with the games. And we start the first one, which is brazos para el asado, because we are relating the game to preparing everything for a barbecue. So first part. So we are simulating a poker game in this workshop, so in this practice. So what we are gonna do is first so I will explain briefly this. So basically it's like poker. We have 5 cards. Each one of you, you have also 2 cards additionally, and then you basically you turn all the cards, first these 3 cards, and these other 2, and then you're gonna start turning all of them. So basically, and then to start building a DAO, let's say like this, with these 4 mechanisms that we talked about, and basically that's it. That's the first part. What else should we? Yeah, let's. Sí, bueno, no, dale, perfecto. One before. Bueno, entonces, vamos a hacer básicamente el primer juego, que es como vamos a simular lo que es póker. Entonces, tenemos básicamente estas 5 cartas en la mesa. O sea, primero van a shuffle, o sea, van a mezclar, gracias. Van a mezclar las cartas. Van a tener las 5 cartas en la mesa, 2 cada uno. Después van a dar vuelta las primeras 3. Las otras 2 las van a seguir, o sea, tapadas. Y van a tener estas 2 cartas. Y después, a medida que van pasando, o sea, van a empezar a hacer esta DAO con las 4 consensus, strategy, incentives. Entonces, o sea, lo que van a hacer es, las van a empezar a dar vuelta. Entonces, primero tenemos esto. Ok, ¿qué DAO podemos hacer o sea, cómo podemos organizar nuestra DAO en base a estas primeras cartas? Y después, a medida que necesiten más información, idealmente tienen una de cada una de las columnas, básicamente, de los mecanismos, ahí empiezan a dar vuelta a las otras porque van a necesitar información adicional. Y van a ver que a medida que van dando vuelta a las cartas, como que por ahí problemas que pensaron que ya los habían solventado, podemos decirlo así, ahora van a aparecer problemas nuevos o ciertas cosas que eran una incógnita van a tener información adicional. Básicamente, esta es la primera parte del juego. Entonces, bueno, y acá es como, esto es lo que va a quedar en la pantalla, básicamente, cómo se va a estructurar el juego. Entonces, bueno, nada, estoy en inglés. Básicamente, imagine your team is in charge of running the grants program. O sea, vimos anteriormente lo que era grants program. Ahora lo que vamos a hacer es ponerlo nosotros en la práctica. Entonces, tenemos un grants program, como había dicho antes, mezclan las cartas, tiran las cartas en la mesa. Importante mezclar las cartas porque si no van a parecer todas de una misma columna. Bueno, después básicamente ver qué es lo que tienen, preguntar, básicamente porque va a haber muchas cartas que no van a saber lo que es. Y tienen 15 minutos para discutir y después la idea es presentar qué es lo que vio cada uno y si tienen algo para... Sí. Exacto, sí. Y eso. Así. No. Ah, perdón. Una cosa, no es como un juego de... O sea, no es uno contra otro. Esto es una sinergia y somos todos un equipo y la idea es generar ideas. Acuérdense de tener estas strategy, consensus, incentive y coordination como pilares para poder construir esta DAO. Perdón, una duda que surgió y que por ahí es para muchos, que los muchos tienen la misma duda. Esto es como si fuese como postear en un foro qué es lo que, o sea, es como si fuese un MIP, digamos, lo que fuese para Maker. Y no es como un juego de uno contra el otro, sino que es una sinergia entre todos, básicamente para generar lo que es esta DAO de lo que es un grants program.
All right, guys, let's spend about 5 more minutes on this, and then we'll come back as a group, and then really get into the main part of the workshop right after this. All right, let's take the next minute to wrap up and come back as a group. Share your last ideas. Okay, 1 minute more. Keep going. We'll try this again. Wrap up the last ideas. We're doing this one more time after this exercise, and like that's when it really matters. So I think it'll be a little bit more fun. All right, so just to recap as we're starting to come back as a group, what this exercise should have shown everybody is proposal writing isn't the easiest thing in the world. It should also show you that if you're limited to what's in front of you, it may not be the best time, so you want to look and try to find the best parts from other ecosystems. But let's hear from you. Every group share one thing they learned or were confused about, or at least one or two. Where's my talkative people? Sure. That's a good point. So the concepts of the cards weren't readily available or weren't known. I don't know when everybody first started their career in Web3, but Merkle drops probably weren't very relevant to you when you first started. Liquidity mining was a big thing years ago. So if you're entering today, you do know it. But when it first emerged, who knows? And then also at the same time, if you're creating new primitives, it's hard to communicate that with just a label. So I think that those are a good takeaway. And it is frustrating, but it's a healthy process to at least identify it and know that you're not alone. Yeah, please.
We started. Thank you very much. We started with 2 cards. Like in the strategy part, we found prediction markets and secret ballot. We take these 2 cards like a point to start building the strategy of the grants program. And in the coordination part, we had mutual credit, time-bound funding, verified credential, and oversight. And we discard like 2 cards, like about tokenizations, like token inflation and token airdrops. We building second price, we take it out these cards because we think that it's not important. And in the incentive part, we have multiple founding source, like it's some obviously, and bounty part for like a way to give the grant to the teams, and they show all the tasks by a bounty. So the grant, you can control all the tasks in this bounty strategy. Thank you very much.
No, that was really nice, and a lot of detail and hard to summarize just from memory, but the thing that I took away is you guys really dug into the mechanisms and tried to find the intent behind them, instead of just saying, let's use this or let's use this. And the most important thing is you made a narrative behind it, so. All right, so that was, again, the lessons here were just to get you exposure to primitives, to mechanisms, and then try to wrap that up in proposal writing. We'd like to thank Seed Latham for having us out here, so let's try to do some work for them today. And what we'd like to challenge everybody here within your groups is to come up with mechanisms for managing public and common goods. So what you see in front of you here is like the 5 steps to proposal writing. First, it starts with the discussion, typically within your team or on the forum. It identifies a problem, and then you start whiteboarding stuff out. You just start exploring solutions and have a loose structure. To take that to the next level, mature wireframes and actually defining a process from those discussions start to emerge. This is typically when you start to see it hit the forum. It's at a point now where you could share ideas and ask for feedback. And once you have feedback, you start to layer in the details. You try to make it more tangible, to your point, to really make sure that, you know, if it is a new idea, you're defining it very clearly, or it's practical, or finding the holes in it. And then last but not least, it goes into MIP form or bylaws or a formal framework. So what we'd like to try to do today is just get through the first 2 parts of having the discussion and coming up with a loose whiteboard or wireframe for one of these 6 prompts that relates to funding the commons. There's concepts of overuse and depletion. Pollution is something that I think everybody has experience with. Access and equity. But at the same time, as long as it fits within the theme, the goal of what we produced today is trying to put primitives into a mechanism that we can share with Seed Latham to then take to retro grants or some of the other ecosystems that they play in. So to do this, what we've done is we've made this template, and if you hit the next thing, there's a QR code. You're able to scan the QR code with your phone, go to Google Docs, and then start writing notes or bullet points within each category. You do have the cards if you need some help brainstorming, but it's not about the cards. It's about defining small little bite-sized pieces of a proposal and putting them into the proper category. So that at the end of the workshop, you have a high-level strategy for saying, dealing with pollution in a concrete way. Something like that could be creating a grant for people to buy EVs, or doing research into some other topic, or promoting people to take their bike to work instead of driving your car. From there, how do you achieve consensus to say the strategy is working or we are executing properly? What's the coordination behind that? And then last but not least, how do you create an incentive mechanism to then put it into a MIP and then hopefully have it get passed and the DAO recognize it as part of the work that the organization's taking on? So again, I think this is where the workshop gets optional, but we'd love to have you all participate. I'll be happy to walk around and answer questions, but again, the cards are just a tool. What we'd like to do is scan the QR code, find a slide or a number. They're 1 through 9. So if you see somebody writing in there, don't delete their stuff, but find your slide, come up with a high-level proposal, and we thank you for your time. We're also happy to hear feedback at this point. Or again, we will be sending this to Seed Latam to have them implement it potentially in their ecosystems if we come up with something powerful.
Preguntas? So for this, we are going to have around like 30 minutes. So you can think, you can write, you can do whatever. So we have time for this. Here are some examples if you want to. And I posted basically the QR code in the Seed Latam group. So you can actually, like, it's Elisa, and there is like the link. So you can go directly into the PowerPoint. So I know most of you could be tired. So before leaving, please, this is the POAP of the workshop. You are all invited to give feedback, to meet your proof of attendance, and of course to talk with us and to connect. And this is our Twitter, and we also have Telegram. So you're all welcome.